The Great Hall was older than most civilizations. It floated in the darkness of space, orbiting a star that had died long ago. And inside it sat the rulers of 43 worlds. They called themselves the Galactic Conclave. They were proud, they were powerful, and right now they were afraid. Elder Voyan stood at the center of the hall. He was the oldest living being in the conclave. His skin was pale gray, stretched thin over a tall frame, and his eyes were like two black stones that had seen too much. When he spoke, his voice was not loud, but every creature in that hall fell silent. "I will say this once," Voyan began. "The sealed world must never be disturbed. Not today, not tomorrow, not in 1,000 cycles. What sleeps there must continue to sleep." The hall was quiet. Most of the representatives looked down at their hands or shifted in their seats. They had heard this warning before. It was old. It was tradition. And like all old traditions, some had begun to doubt it. But not Voyan. Voyan remembered. He raised a thin hand, and the lights in the hall dimmed. A projection appeared above him, spinning slowly. It showed a small blue planet, third from a yellow star, in a system that sat in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. The planet looked peaceful, beautiful even. Swirls of white cloud drifted over blue oceans and green land. "This is Earth," Voyan said, "and on this world there once lived a species called humans." He let the word hang in the air. Several of the younger representatives leaned forward, curious. They had heard the name before only in old stories, the kind told to frighten children. "Our ancestors found them long ago," Voyan continued. "They were primitive then. They lived in small groups. They made tools from stone and bone. They fought each other with sticks and rocks. A minor species on a minor world." Voyan paused. His black eyes swept across the hall. "Our ancestors were wrong." He waved his hand, and the projection changed. It showed a timeline, compressed so that thousands of Earth years passed in seconds. The humans went from stone tools to metal, from metal to machines, from machines to flight, from flight to splitting the atom itself. The timeline moved so fast that several representatives gasped. "They advanced faster than any species we have ever recorded," Voyan said. "What took us tens of thousands of cycles took them mere hundreds. And every time they advanced, they did something that no other species in the galaxy has ever done with such dedication." He looked at the hall with those ancient, heavy eyes. They turned every advancement into a weapon. The projection showed war. Endless, terrible war. Humans fighting humans across centuries. Swords, guns, bombs. Fire that consumed entire cities. Weapons that could poison the land for generations. And then, at the end of the timeline, a flash of light so bright that the projection flickered. The splitting of the atom turned into a bomb that could destroy everything. Elder Suan, the conclave's historian, stood from her seat near the front. She was smaller than Voyan, with deep blue skin and 4 arms that she folded across her chest. Her voice was calm, but carried weight. "The records are clear," Suan said. "The humans did not simply fight when they needed to. They fought constantly. They fought over land, over ideas, over resources, over pride. And they were not just violent. They were creative in their violence. Every generation found new and more terrible ways to destroy." She looked around the hall. "But that is not what frightened our ancestors the most." She paused. What frightened them was that the humans also created. Between their wars they built things of extraordinary beauty. Art, medicine. They cured diseases. They explored their own world. They reached for their own stars. They were capable of breathtaking kindness and unimaginable cruelty, sometimes in the same generation, sometimes in the same individual. Suan sat down. Our ancestors did not know what to do with such a species. They could not predict them. They could not understand them. And so, they made a choice. Voyan nodded. They sealed the system. A barrier of energy was placed around the human star. Nothing could get in. Nothing could get out. The humans were left alone, trapped with themselves. Our ancestors believed they would eventually destroy each other. He lowered his hand, and the projection faded. That was thousands of cycles ago. The barrier has held. Earth has gone silent, and the conclave has been at peace. He looked directly at one figure in the hall. A tall, broad creature with dark red armor and golden eyes that burned with ambition. Until now. Rovi, warlord of the Tekhari Empire, stood up. He was everything Voyan was not. Young, loud, and hungry. His empire was the third largest in the conclave, and he wanted it to be the first. He smiled at Voyan with teeth that were too sharp and too many. "Elder," Rovi said, his voice carrying easily across the hall, "I respect your age. I respect your wisdom. But I do not respect your fear." He stepped forward, his armored boots ringing against the floor. "You are asking us to leave an entire star system untouched because of stories. Old stories about a species that probably killed itself off thousands of cycles ago. That system has rare minerals worth more than some of the worlds in this conclave. Its position is strategically perfect, and you want us to avoid it because of ghosts?" It was a hard, sharp sound. "Our petition to open the sealed system and claim it for the Tekhari Empire." The hall erupted. Voices rose from every corner. Some shouted in anger, some in agreement, some in fear. Voyan raised his hand for silence. It took a long time to come. "The seal stays," Voyan said firmly. "This is not a matter of resources or strategy. This is a matter of survival." The conclave voted. The result was clear. The majority sided with the elders. The seal would remain. Rovi stood still as the vote was announced. He did not argue. He did not shout. He simply smiled that sharp, dangerous smile and turned to leave. Behind him, his second-in-command, Lento, walked quickly to keep up. Lento was thinner than Rovi, quieter, and far more careful. He leaned close and whispered, "Commander, please tell me you will accept the vote." Rovi did not look at him. "I never asked for their permission, Lento. I asked for their blessing." There is a difference. Lento felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Commander, the elders—" "The elders are afraid of the dark," Rovi said. "I am not." 3 days later, Rovi's warfleet, 60 ships strong, armed with enough firepower to crack a planet, jumped across the galaxy toward the sealed system. They moved in silence, without conclave authorization, without announcement. When they reached the edge of the barrier, Rovi stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the shimmering wall of energy that had held for thousands of years. It was vast and ancient and beautiful in its own terrible way. "Fire," he said. The fleet opened up with everything it had. The barrier, weakened by millennia of decay and neglect, shuddered. Cracks of light spread across its surface like veins. And then, with a sound that no one heard, but everyone in the galaxy would eventually feel, it shattered. Alarms screamed across conclave monitoring stations. Red lights flashed on 100 worlds. Elder Suan dropped the tablet she was holding. Pika, a small, nervous diplomat stationed at the edge of the quarantine zone, stared at his screen and began to tremble. And in the great hall, Elder Voyan stood alone. He felt the barrier break like a pain in his chest. He closed his ancient eyes and whispered to the empty room, "What has he done?" Somewhere in the cold darkness beneath the surface of Earth's moon, a light turned on. Then another, then 1,000 more. Machines that had been sleeping for longer than most civilizations had existed began to hum. Power flowed through ancient circuits. Screens flickered to life. and in the silence of a frozen chamber, deep beneath the lunar dust, a heart that had not beaten in millennia began to beat again. Rovi expected a graveyard. That was what he told his officers as the fleet moved through the shattered remains of the barrier and entered the sealed system for the first time. He expected silence. He expected ruins. He expected to stand on the bones of a dead world and laugh at the elders for their foolish fear. The system was quiet. The yellow star burned calmly at the center, old and steady. The planets drifted in their orbits as they always had. The fleet's scanners swept across each world, one by one. The fourth planet, a red dusty ball, was empty. The gas giants were useless. The smaller rocky worlds were barren. And Earth itself, the third planet, was a ruin. The scanners showed a world choked by overgrown forests and poisoned oceans. The atmosphere was unstable. Massive craters scarred the surface, some so old they had become lakes and valleys. Cities had once stood there, the scanners said, but nothing remained except ghosts of metal and stone, buried under thousands of years of dirt and green. Rovi stood on his bridge and spread his arms wide. This is what the elders feared? A dead garden? His officers laughed. Lento did not. Lento was watching his own scanner. His 4 eyes moved quickly across the data, and what he saw made his skin turn a shade lighter. He stepped closer to the display and ran the scan again. "Commander," he said quietly. Rovi ignored him and continued to enjoy his victory. "Commander," Lento said again, louder. Rovi turned, annoyed. "What?" "The moon." Lento pointed at the display. Earth's single moon hung pale and gray in the scanner image. It looked dead like everything else. But beneath its surface, buried deep in the rock, there were energy readings. Faint, but structured. Organized, not natural. "Something is running down there," Lento said. "Something artificial. Something that still has power." Rovi stared at the readings. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered across his golden eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by that familiar hunger. "Send a ground team," he ordered. 30 Takari soldiers landed on the moon's surface in armored dropships. They wore full combat gear, carried plasma rifles, and moved in tight formation across the gray dust. They found the entrance buried in a crater, a massive door made of a metal none of them recognized, sealed shut but not locked. It opened when they touched it, as if it had been waiting. Inside, the tunnels went deep. The walls were smooth and lined with cables that pulsed with faint blue light. The air was breathable, kept clean by machines that hummed softly behind the walls. The soldiers moved carefully, their weapons raised, their breathing loud in their helmets. They reached the main chamber after 20 minutes of walking downward, and when they did, they stopped. The chamber was enormous. It stretched out in every direction, larger than some cities, carved into the heart of the moon itself, and filling every corner of it, stacked in rows that seemed to go on forever, were chambers. Thousands of them, tens of thousands. Each one was made of dark metal and frosted glass, and inside each one, barely visible through the ice, was a figure. Human figures, perfectly preserved, not dead, sleeping. The lead soldier contacted the flagship immediately. His voice was shaking. "Commander, they are here. They are alive. There are thousands of them." On the bridge, Lento grabbed the arm of his chair so hard that his claws left marks. Rovi leaned forward, his golden eyes wide, not with fear, with fascination. "Bring me one," he said. But before the soldiers could move, something happened. One of them, a young and nervous trooper, stumbled against a console near the wall. His armored elbow hit a panel of buttons. A sound rang through the chamber, a deep, low tone, like a bell struck underwater. Red lights flooded the ceiling. The blue cables in the walls pulsed brighter, and with a long, slow hiss, the nearest row of chambers began to open. The soldiers raised their weapons and pointed them at the opening chambers. Steam and cold air poured out, covering the floor in white fog. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then a hand appeared, gripping the edge of a chamber. A human hand. It was strong and steady, not the weak, trembling hand of someone waking from normal sleep. The fingers tightened, and a man pulled himself upright. Han Do-hyun opened his eyes for the first time in thousands of years. The cold hit him first, then the light, then the noise, alarms and hissing, and the clicking of alien weapons. His muscles burned as blood flowed through them again. His mind, trained through years of military discipline, cut through the confusion like a blade through smoke. He saw alien soldiers. He counted 12 in his immediate view. He noted their weapons, energy-based, short-range, probably plasma. He identified the exits, one behind the soldiers, 2 more along the far wall. He assessed the threat level in less than 3 seconds. He was not afraid. More chambers opened. A woman pulled herself out of the one next to him, gasping and blinking. Yun-Nari. She was shorter than Do-hyun, with sharp eyes and steady hands that had once built things that saved millions of lives. She looked at the aliens, looked at Do-hyun, and without a word, moved to stand beside him. Then came Baek Ji-suk. He was built like a wall and moved like a cat. He woke up faster than any of them, rolling out of his chamber and landing on his feet in one smooth motion. His eyes locked onto the alien soldiers, and something dark and calm settled across his face. He cracked his neck and said nothing. More humans woke, dozens, then hundreds. They rose from their chambers in silence, shaking off the cold, and every single one of them looked at the armed aliens with the same expression. Not panic, not confusion, awareness. The Takari soldiers began to back up. They had trained for combat against other species. They had fought wars across star systems. But something about these creatures unsettled them in a way they could not explain. It was the eyes, the human eyes. They were too focused, too aware, too alive. A young Takari soldier, barely past his training, panicked. He raised his rifle and fired a shot into the ceiling. The sound echoed through the massive chamber like thunder. Everything happened at once. Ji-suk moved. He covered the distance between himself and the soldier in 2 steps. His hand closed around the barrel of the rifle and bent it sideways like it was made of soft metal. His other hand caught the soldier by the chest plate, lifted him off his feet, and held him in the air. The whole thing took less than 2 seconds. The other humans reacted instantly. Without a single word, without any signal, they spread out across the chamber in a defensive formation. Those near the walls covered the exits. Those near the center formed a protective ring around the ones still waking up. It was not planned. It was instinct, buried deep in their bones, older than language itself. Do-hyun stepped forward. He looked at the Takari commander, a large soldier with decorated armor, who was now pointing a trembling weapon at Do-hyun's chest. Do-hyun did not know the alien's language. He did not know where he was or how long he had been asleep, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was in control. He looked the commander in the eyes and spoke. His words were in a language the Takari had never heard, but the meaning was universal. His voice was calm, steady, and carried the weight of absolute authority. Stand down. The commander did not lower his weapon, but he did not fire either. His hands were shaking. On the flagship, Lento watched the live feed from the soldiers' cameras. His mouth was dry. His hearts, he had two, were beating out of rhythm. He opened a channel to Rovi. "Commander," Lento said, and his voice cracked. "They are alive. There are thousands of them, and they are not afraid of us." There was silence on the other end. For the first time since Lento had known him, Rovi had no words. Deep in the facility, past the rows of opening chambers, past the waking humans and the frozen soldiers. Shin Unji woke up alone. She was in a different section, near the facility's core systems. She was thin and quiet, with glasses that had somehow survived millennia in cryo, and a mind that worked in ways most people could not follow. She sat up slowly, looked around, and noticed the console next to her. It was alive. Blinking lights, flowing data, a screen filled with symbols she had helped design before the world ended. She touched the screen. The entire facility responded. Lights that had been dim for thousands of years blazed to full brightness. Systems that had been running on emergency power roared back to life. The floor vibrated as generators deep below activated for the first time since the barrier was raised. And then the facility's AI, humanity's last creation, their final gift to the future, woke up. It reached out through the facility's communication systems, through the antenna arrays hidden across the lunar surface, and it broadcast a signal. It went out in every direction, on every frequency, at a strength that could not be ignored. The message reached Rovi's fleet first, then the Conclave's monitoring stations, then the relay networks, then every listening device in the galaxy. It said only 5 words. Humanity is awake, we remember. The broadcast hit the galaxy like a stone thrown into still water. Ripples of panic spread from system to system. On 100 worlds, alarms sounded and emergency councils were called. Ships that had not been armed in generations powered up their weapons. Species that had lived in peace for thousands of cycles suddenly remembered what fear tasted like. Pika heard the broadcast on his small station at the edge of the quarantine zone. He was a short creature, barely reaching a human's waist, with soft brown fur and large round eyes that were always a little too wide. He worked as a low-ranking diplomat for the Conclave, the kind of job that involved filing reports that nobody read and attending meetings that nobody cared about. His life was quiet and boring, and he liked it that way. When the message came through, humanity is awake, we remember, Pika dropped his cup of warm drink on the floor and stared at the screen for a full minute, without blinking. Then he sent an urgent transmission to Elder Voyan. His hands were shaking so badly that he had to type it 3 times. The seal is broken. They are awake. Please advise immediately. On the moon, things were moving fast. Doyen had gathered the awakened humans in the facility's central command room. There were over 300 of them now, with more waking every hour. The facility's AI, which they had simply called Guide, was feeding them information as quickly as they could absorb it. The truth was worse than any of them had imagined. They had not destroyed themselves. They had been imprisoned. The last generation of humanity had seen the barrier closing around their solar system and understood what was happening. They could not stop it. The Conclave's technology was too advanced. So they did what humans had always done when faced with impossible situations. They adapted. They built. The lunar facility was their answer. Deep beneath the surface of the moon, hidden from the barrier's sensors, they constructed a survival vault. The best and brightest of humanity were selected and frozen. The AI was built to maintain the facility, to wait and to wake them when the barrier fell. Thousands of years, that was how long they had been sleeping. Everything they knew was gone. Their cities, their countries, their families, their entire civilization, dust and memory. Nari watched the faces of the people around her as they absorbed this. Some wept quietly. Some stared at the walls with empty eyes. Some clenched their fists until their knuckles turned white. But nobody broke. Nobody fell apart. They grieved in silence, and then they got to work. That was the thing about humans that the galaxy had never understood. Grief did not stop them. It fueled them. Do-hyun called a meeting with his core team, Nari, Jisuk, Unji, and a pilot named Kwon Tae-won, who had woken up asking if there was anything to eat and anything to fly, in that order. Taiwan was lean and restless, with messy hair and a grin that appeared at the worst possible times. He was also, according to the old records, one of the best combat pilots humanity had ever produced. "Here is what we know," Do-hyun said, standing before a holographic display that Guy projected for them. "The aliens who broke the barrier are called the Tekari. They have 60 warships in orbit. Their technology is more advanced than ours was, but not by as much as you might think. Guide has been scanning their systems since they arrived." He looked at Eunji. "Report." Eunji pushed her glasses up her nose. She had been awake for less than 12 hours, and had already taken apart a captured Tekari communication device, a plasma rifle, and what she believed was some kind of personal shield generator. Their weapons used directed plasma, powerful but slow to recharge. Their shields are energy-based, strong against physical impact, but weak against targeted frequency disruption. Their communication system is encrypted, but uses a pattern-based algorithm that I broke about 4 hours ago. She paused. Their ships are impressive. Their engineering is not. They build for strength, not for adaptability. Every system has one function. If that function fails, the whole system fails. Taiwan raised his hand. "What about their ships? Can they fly?" "They can move in straight lines very fast," Eunji said. "Their maneuvering capability is limited. They rely on formation tactics." Taiwan grinned. "So they cannot dogfight." "They cannot." Do-hyun nodded. "The Tekari commander, Rovi, has given us 1 solar cycle to surrender unconditionally. That is roughly 26 hours. Jisok, who had been leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, spoke for the first time. "We are not waiting 26 hours. Do-hyun looked at him. "No, we are not." The plan was Do-hyun's, but every person in the room added something to it. That was how humans worked. Not through rigid command structures, but through shared thinking, constant adaptation, ideas bouncing back and forth until they became something sharp and dangerous. They would not attack the Tekari army. That was what Rovi expected. Instead, they would cut the head off the snake. 14 hours before the surrender deadline, a small team left the lunar facility through maintenance tunnels that opened on the moon's dark side. There were 12 of them, led by Jisok. They wore no armor, none was available, and carried no guns. They had knives made from alien metal that Eunji had cut and shaped, and they had something far more dangerous than any weapon. They had 10,000 years of human combat knowledge stored in their bones. Jisek's team reached the surface and moved across the lunar dust in silence. 3 of Rovi's smaller ships were parked in a crater nearby, left as part of a surveillance perimeter. The teams hit all 3 simultaneously. The Tekari guards never saw them coming. In 60 seconds, 3 ships were taken, their crews restrained with their own equipment, and Jisek's team was airborne. They did not fly toward the Tekari fleet. They flew under it. The captured ships had valid identification codes, and Eunji had already programmed them to broadcast the right signals. The Tekari fleet's automated defense systems let them pass without a single alarm. They docked with Rovi's flagship through a maintenance port on its underside. The port was unguarded because no Tekari commander had ever imagined that an enemy would board a ship through a waste disposal hatch. Jisok did not mind the smell. He had dealt with worse. Inside the flagship, Jisok's team split into 3 groups. 1 went for the engine room. 1 went for the communication center. 1, Jisok's group, went for the bridge. The Tekari crew was not prepared. They were warriors, yes. They were trained, yes. But they had never faced an enemy that fought the way humans fought. The humans did not charge. They did not form lines. They appeared from shadows, struck fast, and vanished before the Tekari could react. They used the ship's own corridors against its crew, creating bottlenecks, false alarms, and confusion. In the engine room, 2 humans disabled the flagship's faster-than-light drive in under 3 minutes. They did not destroy it. Unji had been specific about that. She wanted it intact for study. They simply removed a core component and took it with them. In the communications center, 3 humans uploaded a program that Unji had written. It was not a virus, not yet. It was a listener, a silent piece of code that would sit inside the Tekari communication network and record everything. On the bridge, Jisiok walked through the door and found 6 Tekari officers staring at him in shock. The fight lasted 8 seconds. When it was over, all 6 were on the floor, alive but unable to move. Jisiok had not killed a single one. He had been ordered not to. He stood in the center of Rovi's own bridge, surrounded by fallen enemies, and tapped his communicator. Bridge secured. Drives disabled. We are leaving. The entire operation took 17 minutes. By the time Rovi, who had been sleeping in his private quarters, reached the bridge, Jisok's team was already back on the moon. Rovi looked at his fallen officers. He looked at the dark engine displays. He looked at the report showing that his flagship, the most powerful ship in his fleet, could no longer jump to faster-than-light speed. For the first time, Rovi felt something he had never felt before. It was cold and unfamiliar, like swallowing ice. It sat in his chest and spread through his body. It was fear. He crushed it. He buried it deep beneath his pride and his rage and his golden burning eyes. All ships, he roared into the fleet communication channel. Full assault on the lunar facility. Destroy everything. Leave nothing alive. Lento closed his eyes. He had seen what the humans did with 12 people and 17 minutes. He did not want to imagine what they would do with 300 people and a facility full of ancient technology. The Tekari fleet moved toward the moon. The battle that followed would be talked about for a very long time. The humans used the facility's tunnel network to appear and disappear across the lunar surface. They struck supply lines and disabled landing ships. They used the moon's low gravity to move in ways the Tekari could not predict. They turned every crater, every ridge, every shadow into a weapon. The Tekari lost 40 ground vehicles, 12 dropships, and over 200 soldiers in 6 hours. The humans lost 11. Rovi pulled his forces back to orbit and stared down at the gray moon. It stared back at him, silent and patient, as if it was waiting for him to try again. On the conclave station, Pika delivered his report to Elder Voyen. His voice was barely a whisper. Voyen listened without moving. When Pika finished, the old elder stood in silence for a long time. Then he walked to the great hall and stood before the assembled conclave. The representatives looked at him with wide, fearful eyes. "We sealed them away because they were dangerous when they fought each other," Voyen said. His voice was heavy with something beyond fear. It was the weight of a mistake that could not be undone. Now they have a common enemy. Now they have a reason. May the stars forgive us all. 11 days. That was all it took. Shin Unji built a faster-than-light engine in 11 days. She used parts from the captured Tekari ships, materials from the lunar facility's storage, and theories that human physicists had written down thousands of years ago, but never had the chance to test. She worked without sleeping for the last 3 days. Nari had to physically force her to drink water twice. When the engine was finished, it was ugly. It was bolted together with mismatched metal. It hummed at a frequency that made everyone's teeth ache. Wires stuck out at odd angles, and the cooling system was literally a series of pipes filled with water from the facility's recycling tanks. It was also twice as fast as anything in the galaxy. Unji presented it to Do-yun, with dark circles under her eyes, and a quiet pride that she did not bother to hide. "It works," she said. "I tested the math 400 times. It will get us out of the system and across to the nearest star in half the time a Tekari ship could do it. Taiwan, who had been waiting for this moment like a child waiting for a gift, was already sitting in the pilot seat of the modified ship. He had named it Blackbird, after something he said he remembered from a history class. He was tapping the controls and grinning so wide that Nari worried about the structural integrity of his face. "Can I go now?" he asked. Do-hyun looked at Nari. She was going on this flight too, not as a scientist, but as a diplomat. Humanity needed information. They needed to understand the galaxy they had woken up in. And they needed allies, or at the very least, people who would not shoot them on sight. "Bring us back something useful," Do-hyun said. The Blackbird launched from the lunar surface and hit faster than light speed in a burst of light that made the remaining Takari ships scramble in confusion. By the time Rovi's officers figured out what had happened, the ship was gone, already halfway across the sector. Taiwan flew like he was born in space. He pushed the Blackbird harder than Unji's calculations said was safe, taking corners through gravity wells that should have torn the ship apart. He whooped and laughed the entire way. Nari sat behind him, gripping her seat with white knuckles, silently questioning every decision that had led her to this moment. Their first stop was the Conclave's outer relay station, where a signal had been detected. Someone was trying to reach them. When they arrived, they found a single small ship waiting. Inside it was Pika. The little diplomat had been sent by Elder Voyan as an envoy. His official mission was to make contact with the humans and assess their intentions. His unofficial mission, as far as Pika was concerned, was to survive the experience. When Pika stepped onto the Blackbird and saw Taiwan's wild grin and Nari's calm, serious face, he froze. He had studied the ancient files. He knew what humans were capable of. Every muscle of his small body was telling him to run. Nari looked down at him. She noticed his trembling. She noticed the way his large, round eyes kept darting to the exits. She knelt down so she was at his level, and spoke softly. "You are safe," she said. "We are not going to hurt you. Would you like some water?" Pika stared at her. Of all the things he had expected from the awakened monsters of the ancient warnings, a glass of water was not one of them. His eyes filled with tears and he nodded quickly, too overwhelmed to speak. Over the next several hours, Pika told them everything. He talked about the Conclave, its politics, its factions, its fears. He talked about the Takari and Rovi's growing desperation. He talked about the other species, some peaceful and some warlike, and how the news of humanity's awakening had sent shockwaves through all of them. "Most of them are afraid," Pika said, holding his water cup with both small hands. "The old stories say that humans are destroyers, that you burn everything you touch. Some Conclave members want to destroy you before you can spread." Nari translated this for Do-hyun through a communication channel. There was a long pause. "Then we need to change the story," Do-hyun said. The plan was not what anyone expected. Do-hyun did not order fleets to be built. He did not plan invasions. He did not demand territory or threaten war. Instead, he did something that confused the entire galaxy. He sent help. Small teams of humans carried on ships that Unji and her growing team of engineers built at an almost frightening pace, spread out into nearby systems. They carried no weapons. They carried tools, knowledge, and an offer. On a dying agricultural world called Tenwa, the soil had been poisoned by centuries of chemical farming. The alien farmers had tried everything. Their crops were failing. Their people were starving. 3 Conclave agricultural experts had visited and declared the situation hopeless. Nari arrived with a team of 4. She spent 2 days studying the soil, the water, the local plant life. On the 3rd day, she engineered a new crop strain using a combination of human botanical knowledge and local genetics. It grew in the poisoned soil. It cleaned the soil as it grew. Within a single growing cycle, the fields of Tenwa were green again. The farmers stared at her like she had performed a miracle. Nari simply shrugged and said, We have been farming for 10,000 years. We have seen worse. On a space station called Redmark, the shield generators had been failing for years. The station housed 50,000 people and sat in an asteroid belt. Without shields, it was only a matter of time before a rock punched through the hull and killed everyone inside. Engineers from 3 different species had tried to fix the problem, and failed. Unji sent a junior engineer named Park Yuna with a toolkit and a data pad. Yuna was 24 years old when she was frozen and had been awake for less than a month. She redesigned the entire shield system in 8 hours. She did not just fix it, she made it 4 times more efficient, using less power and covering more area. When the station commander asked how she did it, Yuna looked confused. "I just looked at it differently," she said. "Your engineers kept trying to make the old design work better. I built a new design." On a border world where 2 species had been arguing over water rights for 60 years, Do-hyun mediated. He sat both sides down, listened for 4 hours, asked 12 questions, and proposed a solution so simple and fair that both parties agreed within minutes. The lead diplomat from one side asked him how he had seen the answer so clearly. "I have studied 1,000 years of human peace negotiations," Do-hyun said. "Most of them failed. You learn more from failures than from successes." The galaxy watched, and slowly, carefully, the story began to change. But not for everyone. Rovi watched too. He watched the humans spread through the galaxy like water through cracks in a wall. He watched species that had feared humanity begin to welcome them. He watched his own authority, his own power, begin to shrink. And he was furious. He sent messages to every warlike species in the galaxy. He called in favors, made threats, offered bribes. Within weeks, he had assembled a coalition, 3 other aggressive species who shared his fear of humanity's rapid rise. They called themselves the Burning Pact, and together they gathered an armada of over 1,000 warships. The Burning Pact sent an ultimatum to the Conclave. The message was simple: hand over the humans, or the Pact will take them by force. Any species that shelters or aids humans will be treated as an enemy. The Conclave fractured. Elder Suon and several other leaders began quietly evacuating their systems, certain that war was coming and that nothing could stop it. Others argued for surrender, for giving the humans back to the Tekhari to avoid a galactic conflict. A few, a very few, argued for standing with humanity. Pika watched the debates from his small seat in the corner of the Great Hall. He had spent weeks with the humans now. He had eaten their food, which was strange but good. He had listened to their music, which made him feel things he did not have words for. He had watched them argue with each other over small things, and unite instantly over big ones. He was no longer afraid of them. He was afraid for them. He sent a message to Do-hyun. "The Pact has 1,000 ships. You have maybe 40. What will you do?" Do-hyun's response came back quickly. "What we have always done." Pika noticed something strange when he visited the human settlement on the moon. The Burning Pact's ultimatum had been broadcast across the galaxy. Every other species was in panic, but the humans were calm. Not the forced calm of people pretending to be brave. The genuine calm of people who had been here before. Do-hyun was calm. He sat in his command room, reviewing data and making plans with the same steady focus he always had. She was organizing supply lines and coordinating with allied species as if she was planning a dinner party, instead of preparing for the largest military confrontation the galaxy had seen in millennia. Even Jisuk was calm, and Jisuk was never calm. He sat in the armory, sharpening a blade, humming a song that Pika did not recognize. He looked almost peaceful. That was the most terrifying thing Pika had ever seen. "Aren't you afraid?" Pika asked Do-hyun one evening. Do-hyun looked at him. His eyes were steady and warm, the eyes of a man who carried a heavy weight and had made peace with it, We have been at war with ourselves for our entire existence, Do-Yun said. Everything we are, our science, our medicine, our art, our technology, all of it was forged in conflict. We have fought on every piece of ground our world had to offer. We have fought in the air, under the ocean, and in the space above our planet. We have fought with sticks and with atoms. This is not new to us, Pika. He put a hand on the small alien's shoulder, gentle despite its strength. This is what we were born for. 3 days later, the burning packed armada arrived. 1,000 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and filled the sky around the human-allied systems like a dark cloud blocking out the stars. They were enormous, bristling with weapons, carrying hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Rovi stood on the bridge of his new flagship, larger and more powerful than the one Jisok had crippled. He opened a communication channel that broadcast to every ship, every station, every world in range. "Humans," he said, and his voice dripped with contempt. "Your time is over before it has begun. Surrender now, and I will be merciful. Resist, and I will burn you from the stars." There was silence. The entire galaxy held its breath. Then Do-Hyun's voice came through the channel. It was calm. It carried no anger, no fear, and no bluff. It was simply the truth. We do not surrender. We never have. You should have listened to the elders. The channel closed. The stars were silent. And then the war began. The first thing the Burning Pact noticed was that the humans did not form a line. Every space battle in galactic history followed the same basic pattern. Two fleets would arrange themselves in formation, face each other, and exchange fire until one side broke. It was orderly. It was predictable. It was civilized. The humans did not care about civilized. Taewon's squadron hit the Pact's left flank before the battle officially started. 42 ships, all human-built and human-modified, came screaming out of the shadow of a gas giant where they had been hiding, with their engines cold and their systems dark. They moved in no pattern that any Pact targeting computer could calculate. They weaved and rolled and spiraled through the enemy formation like insects made of fire, hitting critical points and then vanishing before the Pact ships could turn their heavy guns. His ship, still the original Blackbird, now upgraded so many times it barely resembled its first form, danced between plasma blasts with a grace that should have been impossible. He was laughing again. He was always laughing when he flew. The Pact pilots could hear him on the open channel, a wild, joyful sound that frightened them more than any battle cry. "They are everywhere," a Pact commander screamed into his communication system. "They will not hold still." That was the point. Do-Hyun had studied the Pact's fleet composition through the intelligence Unji's hidden code had been gathering for weeks. He knew their formations, their communication protocols, their chain of command. He knew which captains were brave and which were cowards. He knew which ships had been maintained well and which were held together by hope and old repairs. He used all of it. While Taewon's squadron tore into the left flank, Do-Hyun directed a second group to hit the Pact's supply ships at the rear. Without supplies, the armada could fight for days at most. The Pact commanders, focused on the chaos at their front, did not notice the supply ships going dark, one by one, until it was too late. But the real weapon had been planted weeks ago. Unji sat in the command center of the lunar facility, her fingers moving across a console with the speed and precision of a concert pianist. The code she had hidden in the Tekkari communication network during Jisok's first raid had been quietly spreading ever since. It had jumped from the Tekkari ships to the other Pact members during their many planning meetings and joint exercises. Now it sat inside the communication systems of nearly every ship in the Pact armada, silent and patient, waiting for her command. She pushed her glasses up her nose and pressed a single key. The effect was immediate and devastating. Half the Pact fleet lost its internal communication. Orders from flagships never reached their captains. Captains could not talk to their pilots. Pilots could not talk to each other. Ships that had been flying in tight formation suddenly had no coordination. Two heavy cruisers from different pack species collided at full speed, creating a fireball that took out 3 more ships nearby. A squadron of fighters, receiving contradictory orders from 2 different sources, flew in circles before crashing into an asteroid. Chaos. Beautiful, deliberate, carefully engineered chaos. Rovi watched from his bridge as his grand armada fell apart. The golden fire in his eyes flickered. This was not how it was supposed to go. He had the firepower. He had the righteous certainty that these awakened primitives could not possibly stand against the combined might of 4 spacefaring empires. But the humans were not fighting the way they were supposed to. They were not playing by the rules. They were making their own rules, changing them every few minutes, and somehow winning with ships that were smaller, fewer, and less powerful than his. All ships, switch to backup communication channels, Rovi ordered. Unji had anticipated this. The backup channels were compromised too. Use light signals, use anything, just coordinate, Rovi shouted. But his fleet was too large and too diverse. 4 different species, each with their own language, their own protocols, their own instincts. Without the communication network to bind them together, they were not one fleet. They were 4 separate fleets, each confused and frightened and getting in each other's way. And the humans kept hitting them. G-Sec's boarding parties launched during the peak of the confusion. 20 small teams, each carried by fast shuttle, latched onto key packed ships and cut their way inside. They targeted bridge systems, weapon controls, and engine rooms. They did not kill unless they had to. They disabled, restrained, and moved on. Each team hit its target and was gone in under 10 minutes. G-Sec himself led the team that boarded Rovi's flagship. The Takari guards on the flagship were the best Rovi had. They were tall, strong, well-armed, and well-trained. They had fought in a dozen wars and won them all. It did not matter. G-Sec moved through the corridors of the flagship like a ghost. He was not fast in the way that Takari understood fast. He was fast in a way that seemed to break the rules of what a body should be able to do. He read the angles of the corridors, the positions of the guards, the rhythm of their patrols, and he fit himself into the gaps between them like water flowing through stones. His team followed him. They were silent, efficient, and utterly relentless. A guard would turn a corner and find himself on the floor before he understood what had happened. Weapons were taken, doors were sealed, and the team moved deeper into the ship. On the bridge, the senior officers heard the reports coming in. Guards down on Deck 7, Deck 9, Deck 12. Whatever was coming was cutting through the ship like a knife through paper. When the bridge doors opened, and Ji-Seok walked through, the officers reached for their weapons, but Ji-Seok was already among them. The fight was short and one-sided. Ji-Seok fought with a precision that was almost gentle, each strike exactly strong enough to disable, no more. He broke no bones that did not need breaking. He caused no pain that was not necessary. When it was over, 6 officers lay on the floor, conscious but unable to move. Ji-Seok stood in the center of the bridge, breathing calmly, and looked at the main display. The battle outside was turning. The packed fleet was fragmenting. Ships were breaking formation and trying to retreat. Meanwhile, Nari was broadcasting on every open channel she could find. Her message went to every packed ship, every crew member, every species in the coalition. This is Yoon Nari, speaking on behalf of humanity. We did not start this fight. We do not want this war. If you stand down now, you will not be harmed. You will not be punished. We are offering you what your commander never did, a choice. Stand down, and we will help you rebuild whatever this war has cost you. We do not want your worlds. We do not want your submission. We want neighbors, not enemies. Many of the packed crews had joined the coalition out of fear. Fear of Rovi, fear of humanity, fear of being left behind. Nari's message gave them a way out that did not require shame. Within an hour, 2 of the 4 packed species had ceased firing and opened surrender channels. Their ships powered down their weapons and drifted in place, waiting. On the flagship, Lento sat in his quarters, listening to the battle fade. He had known this would happen. He had tried to warn Rovi again and again, and every time Rovi had pushed him away with golden-eyed contempt. Now the fleet was broken, the pact was finished, and Rovi was somewhere on the ship, probably doing something stupid and dangerous. Lento made his choice. He walked to the auxiliary command center, locked out the main bridge controls, and opened a channel to the human fleet. "This is Lento, second in command of the Tekkari flagship. I am ordering all remaining Tekkari ships to stand down. I am surrendering the fleet." Do-Hyun's voice came back, calm as always. "We accept. Lower your shields and power down your weapons. Your people will not be harmed." "I tried to warn him," Lento said, and his voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had spent years fighting a battle he could never win. "I know," Do-Hyun said. "It is over." But Rovi was not ready for it to be over. Deep in the lower decks of the flagship, Rovi reached the self-destruct control room. His armor was damaged, his golden eyes wild with fury and humiliation. If he could not win, then nobody would win. He would take the flagship and every human on it with him. He reached for the activation panel. A hand caught his wrist. Jisok stood behind him. He had followed Rovi through the ship, tracking him by the sound of his heavy boots and the trail of broken doors he left behind. Rovi spun and threw a punch with the full force of a Tekkari warlord. Jisok caught the fist, twisted, and drove Rovi to the ground. Rovi struggled. He was bigger, heavier, and stronger, but Jisok held him down with a calm, steady pressure that could not be shaken. He looked down at the warlord, this creature who had broken the seal, who had awakened humanity, who had started a war that shook the galaxy. And he saw a frightened, angry child who had never been told no. "You are not worth it," Jisok said quietly. He held Rovi until the security teams arrived, then let go and walked away without looking back. The battle ended. The burning pact dissolved. The remaining ships surrendered, fled, or simply drifted powerless in space, waiting for rescue. Humanity's losses were light. The pact's losses were heavy. But thanks to Nari's broadcast and Do-Hyun's strict orders against unnecessary killing, the death toll was far lower than it could have been. The galaxy watched the aftermath in stunned silence. 3 days later, Elder Voyen requested a meeting with Do-Hyun. They met on a neutral station, an old conclave outpost with an observation deck that looked out over a vast purple nebula. Voyen walked slowly. He looked older than he had before, if that was possible. The weight of thousands of years of decisions pressed down on his thin shoulders. They stood side by side at the observation window. For a long time, neither spoke. The nebula swirled silently before them, ancient and indifferent to the small beings watching it. "I am sorry," Voyen said at last. "We were afraid. We saw what you could do, and we chose the easy path. We locked you away instead of trying to understand you." He looked at the nebula and thought about Earth. His Earth, the one he remembered, with its blue skies and green hills and endless, terrible, beautiful history. "Fear is understandable," he said, "but a cage is never the answer." Voyen nodded slowly. "What will you do now?" "What we have always done. Build, grow, try to be better than we were before." The conclave convened for a historic vote 1 week later. The motion was simple. Welcome humanity as a full member of the Galactic Conclave, with all rights, responsibilities, and protections. The vote was nearly unanimous. The few who voted against did so quietly and did not make their reasons public. Pika was appointed as the first galactic liaison to humanity. When Elder Voyan told him, Pika's large round eyes went even wider than usual. He stammered for several seconds before managing to squeak out a thank you. He was both deeply honored and mildly terrified. Nari found him pacing outside the ceremony hall and put a hand on his small shoulder. "You will be wonderful," she said. Jisok walked past, gave Pika a friendly pat on the back, and nearly sent him sprawling across the floor. "You will survive," Jisok said, which Pika found less comforting. In the months that followed, the galaxy began to change. Unji established a technology sharing program, carefully selecting which human knowledge to share and in what order. She did not give anyone weapons. She gave them tools, better engines, cleaner energy, stronger medicines. The Conclave's technological progress, which had been stagnant for thousands of years, began to move again for the first time in living memory. Taiwan opened a flight school on a space station near the Conclave Center. His teaching method involved throwing students into simulations so intense that several alien pilots fainted. He considered a student ready for graduation when they could complete his advanced course without crying. So far, the graduation rate was 12%. He was working on it. Nari led the effort to restore Earth. The planet was scarred and wounded, but not dead. With conclave resources and human determination, new settlements began to appear on the surface. Forests were replanted, oceans were cleaned. It would take generations, but the work had begun. Do-hyun stood alone on the observation deck of a human station orbiting Earth. Below him, the planet turned slowly. He could see the scars, the ancient craters, the dead zones, the places where old wars had left permanent wounds on the land. But he could also see lights. New lights, small and scattered, but growing. Nari walked up beside him. She looked down at Earth and then at him. The two of them had carried a heavy weight since the moment they woke up, and they would carry it for a long time yet. But, standing here, watching the first lights of a new beginning, the weight felt a little lighter. "What now?" she asked. Do-hyun smiled. It was a tired smile, worn at the edges, but real as anything he had ever felt. "Now we do what we have always done," he said. "We survive, we adapt, we build." He looked at the stars. There were so many of them, more than he had ever imagined. And somewhere out there, among those countless points of light, were new worlds to explore, new people to meet, new problems to solve, and new mistakes to learn from. And this time, he said quietly, we'd do it right. Below them, Earth turned. The lights grew brighter,